I'm Tracy McCooey, a circuit judge here in the 15th Judicial Circuit. You are about to view a training DVD on victim offender conferencing. The Alabama Center for Dispute Resolution awarded me a grant that allowed me to bring two experts in this area. Dr. Mark Umbright, who has done numerous victim offender training sessions around the world, as well as his assistant. They conducted a 3-day training session here in Montgomery County. We know as judges that the current criminal justice system often fails both victims and offenders. Victims often leave court with numerous questions and unresolved feelings. Offenders are often not held responsible or accountable for their actions, and the community as a whole is often left out of this process. Victim offender conferencing, which comes under the umbrella of restorative justice, provides an alternative path which gives victims an opportunity to have a voice in repairing the harm that has been done.
You know, back in 1978, a handful of idealistic community activists, Judge William Bontrager, who's retired but still talking about restorative justice all over the place in many states, many countries, a handful of primarily Christians and Mennonites, but there are some others, but a small group of people tried this little fledgling thing called Victim Offender Reconciliation Program in Elkhart, Indiana, and it was modeled after a similar effort in Kitchener, Ontario, in 1974 in Canada. And it seemed to have an incredible impact.
Dr. Mark Umbright and his assistant, Cheryl Wilson, conducted a 3-day training session in Montgomery, Alabama on victim offender conferencing. Dr. Mark Umbright is a professor and the founding director of the Center for Restorative Justice and Peacemaking at the University of Minnesota. He is an internationally recognized practitioner and scholar with more than 32 years of experience as a mediator, trainer, researcher, and author of 6 books with more than 130 articles, book chapters, and monographs in the fields of restorative justice, mediation, and peacemaking. Dr. Umbright has conducted training seminars and lectures throughout the world. For the past 22 years, he has served as a consultant trainer for the U.S. Department of Justice. He is currently a visiting professor at Marquette Law School. Cheryl Wilson is a training and research associate at the Center for Restorative Justice and Peacemaking at the University of Minnesota. As a trainer, Cheryl has trained many individuals from around the world in victim offender mediation and conferencing. As a practitioner, she has both facilitated community victims offenders restorative justice dialogues in Minnesota prisons and been actively involved as a volunteer mediator with the Victim Offender Conferencing Program in Washington County, Minnesota. As a research associate, Cheryl has been actively involved in the evaluation of the CVORJ prison-based program.
Classic victim offender mediation, where it's the victim and offender and a mediator, sometimes 1 or 2 support people, it's proven in this country and abroad you can work with hundreds to thousands of cases. From a restorative justice perspective, it's putting on a 3-dimensional lens. It starts with the victim and the victimized family, the victimized community, then the offender and their family. And wherever possible, it tries to address needs at different levels of all involved. Restorative justice is victim-centered, offender-focused in terms of accountability, and as much as possible, community-driven. Would you believe there is more empirical data to show the effectiveness of restorative justice dialogue, like victim offender mediation primarily and then conferencing, than there is for most correctional interventions that we spend billions of dollars with? I'm not exaggerating. There's over 83 studies, empirical studies, not theoretical, in 7 countries that have consistently found positive outcomes on victim satisfaction, offender satisfaction, accountability measures, and recidivism, much to my surprise.
Victim offender conferencing has received support from many different groups here in the United States as well as around the world.
Overwhelmingly, the victim advocacy groups throughout the country, including in Minnesota, including the National Organization for Victim Assistance in Washington, the country's oldest, actually the world's oldest and most influential victim group, are active stakeholders. Like much of my work in recent years, including the 5-year study I did of Texas and Ohio, the first two states, to allow this for crimes of severe violence, like homicide survivors, sexual assault. That was all done through NOVA. And we continually to be involved with them. Overseas, amazing. United Nations has endorsed this, the European Union, our allies. Now, actually, they passed a resolution in 2001 that strongly urges member states to have legislation on victim offender mediation and conferencing in their national legislation by the end of March 2006. The strongest, boldest, risk-taking restorative justice initiative on a county-wide basis was done by the Genesee County Sheriff's Department in upstate New York in the 1970s. I went back there a couple times in the last year and it's still in place. Would you believe that the largest victim offender mediation and conferencing restorative justice program in America that I know of is in arguably one of the most conservative communities in America on the West Coast? Any guesses?
Fresno.
What?
Fresno.
Oh, no. Well, there's a beautiful program in Fresno, but that's not it. It's a much more conservative, well-known county. It's been in, you got it, Orange County. Yeah. Even in the midst of their bankruptcy, chronic bankruptcy, it seems like, they, for the many years, the government has contracted with a first-generation faith-based organization that now is called, it's called the Institute for Conflict Management, giving them over $250,000 to work with up to 1,000 or more juvenile offenders before entering the courts, giving the offenders and the victims of those acts the option, it's all voluntary, to meet each other, to talk about the impact, to develop a plan to repair the harm, and if completed, meaning if the offenders complete it, don't just agree to it, but they do it, it doesn't go any further. That is viewed as a good, sound, conservative investment to keep 1,000 cases out of the overcrowded justice system. And again, of course, Texas being an example, the first state, anywhere, not just in this country, but anywhere in the world, to have formal policy allowing victims of the worst crimes imaginable the opportunity to do this.
Victim offender conferencing is victim-centered.
Restorative justice is a victim-centered approach. Offender-focused in terms of accountability, but it is victim-centered. It begins with the reality that people, families, communities have been victimized. Victims are not just a piece of evidence to use in the process of dealing with a law violation. They're absolutely central. They should be respected. Their needs should be addressed in whatever way it can be. They should be invited into the process, literally into the process of holding the very person accountable if they want, and some don't, but far more want to than we ever would have thought, through circle sentencing, through using victim offender mediation and conferencing. You can use it as a pre-adjudication, pre-conviction point where it can be functionally, it's like a sentencing recommendation.